Tricia Minkler is our guest today on Positive Connections Radio. Please be sure to go to our Facebook page, Positive Connections Radio, and like the page. Tricia started out working as a Deputy Assistant Prosecutor with the U.S. Attorney's Office in Kings County, Washington. Then she became a Deputy Prosecuting Attorney for Mason County and Assistant City Attorney for the City of Auburn. Having a lifelong dream of becoming a police officer, Tricia gave up her career as an attorney and became a police officer for the City of Auburn in Des Moines, Washington. Tricia shares her story of dealing with alcoholism and mental health issues along with her recovery path and how she survived to tell her story to help others. Listen and find out how she was on the verge of ending her life when the call for duty halted her intentions and she finally reached out for help. Welcome to Positive Connections Radio. This is Mike Cook. This podcast is directed towards first responders and others who may be suffering in silence and are fearful to ask for help. You're not alone. You don't have to lose it all in order to get help. Trust yourself, stand up, and break the stigma. Everybody, welcome to Positive Connections Radio, and I'm with Tricia Minkler. Tricia, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
It takes a lot of courage to actually talk about the things that have happened in our lives and what we're doing now so we can give back to other people. If you can, maybe give a brief description about where your professional life was like.
I didn't start off as a police officer. Was a police officer for 8 years. So I came into the profession when I was 29. Prior to that, I was a prosecutor. I worked at the county level and the city level. And I specialized in domestic violence type crimes. And I really liked that. And then prior to becoming a prosecutor in undergrad and all through law school, I worked for the U.S. Attorney's Office. So I've been involved in law enforcement in some way for about 20 years.
Okay, so what was the transition of being a police officer? What happened there?
I always wanted to be a cop. It's funny, I was cleaning out stuff for my parents a couple years ago. And they found my mom found a thing that I wrote when I was in kindergarten, and it said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And it was a police officer. And so I went to law school because I was playing college basketball. I got hurt. Professor said, "Hey, this is a job you might be interested in. Apply for it." So I applied for the U.S. Attorney's Office. I got the job, and I liked working for the U.S. Attorney's Office and being a prosecutor. So I went to law school. I had no plans to go to law school. I started college. I thought maybe I'll do the FBI thing or something with the feds after I graduate. And then I was in law school in Oklahoma. When you work feds, you don't get to pick where you live. And seeing that I had already worked in Montana and lived in Montana and was from Washington, I knew I wouldn't get placed back in those states. Mm-hmm. So I didn't go the fed route. And I continued just working for a prosecutor's office because that's what I liked. I liked the criminal side.
You didn't want to move away from the snow, right?
No, the snow in the mountains, and I didn't want to end up in like Oklahoma again. No offense.
And God forbid California.
And the food's great there, but it's just not for me. I came back up to Washington and I worked for prosecutors, and I liked it, but I kept being more geared towards the personality of law enforcement. And I kept thinking, man, I really just want to do this. I just want to be a cop. But I went to law school, right? So you have the pressures of, well, you're a lawyer, be a lawyer. And then finally, I had my best friend from law school, who I don't talk to anymore. Her husband was an off-duty firefighter in Kansas City, Missouri, and he got killed by a police officer the night of their wedding reception.
Of the wedding reception for their wedding?
Yep, the night of their wedding reception.
Tell us a little bit about that.
It was in Kansas City, Missouri. After the wedding, my friend and her husband were in the cab in front of the hotel, and the cab driver said something to upset the husband. And so he got mad and punched the cab driver. And then he took off on foot. Obviously, they were all intoxicated. He took off on foot, and the police officer working at the hotel left the hotel and pursued the guy on foot. each can make their own determination if the cop should have done that or not, because they can ID the guy. He had his wife right there.
Run after him, you mean, right?
Yeah,
Right.
going after him. I mean, you can't Monday quarterback that kind of stuff because you don't know what it's like to be in that situation. And so he went after him, and the firefighter and him ended up in a fight, and the firefighter mounted him and was bashing his head in, and the cop had to shoot him to save his life. You can't.
Of course.
You get mounted, and that's a deadly use of force for any law enforcement officer. So that happened. And this was all, when the society was looking at law enforcement and seeing if it needs to be improved or changed, about 2013. Then I was sitting in the courtroom, and I was handling cases for the City of Auburn. A call came across the screen because we could get the CAD for the police officers, so we could see their active calls. And it was my best friend growing up was hit by a drug driver and was killed in walking to her car in front of her house. And so I got that news, and I was like, man, life's short. If I'm going to do this, I need to do this now. I don't have kids. There's really no reason not to. I want to be more involved in the investigation process and not so much the aftermath and trying to put out the fires or dealing with that.
Yeah, because being a prosecutor, you're getting these cases, and as a prosecutor, and it's already done, and you sort of have to determine things, whether or not it's going to go to trial, whether or not what charges are going to be filed on it. It's sort of out of your hands. And you thought maybe going into law enforcement, you could at least maybe change the course of some events before it happens.
Yeah, and then I also was like, if I want to look at policing and help policing as a profession, I can't do it from not being involved in the profession, right?
Right.
I have no idea what it's like to be an officer, and I want to do it. It's something I've always wanted to do, so I did it at 29. I made the leap, and it cost me a lot of friendships. It cost me several relationships because people were mad that I became a cop.
They're mad because you changed from being a DA to a police officer.
Yep.
Really? And they just cut you out?
Yep. They had a bad taste in law enforcement, and they didn't want anything to do with it and me. And I said, that makes no sense. You know who I am.
Doesn't it seem like, you're talking about the prosecutor's office being mad at police. Aren't we supposed to be working together?
Yeah. And I'm talking about other lawyers too. People, my friends cut me off. My friend that I went to law school with, that I flew out the day after her husband was killed. And I'm like, but I'm not the officer that killed your husband. I'm just me, so.
That's got to be really tough, especially dealing with that. And you probably think that she has something against you because you became a police officer.
I just think she has her own demons that she has to overcome. And I now can say our friendship served a purpose during the course of that time. And if she were ever to call me again, I would answer the phone in a second.
Right on. And who knows what the future brings, Tricia? Do you remember the passion that you had becoming a police officer? Remember what that felt like?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what it feels like. And I think a lot of people can sort of get it, especially if you're in law enforcement.
The application process and all that is nerve-wracking because everything about you gets scrutinized. And then when you finally get accepted, it's so much fun. It's like you're it's like you're a kid again. For me, at least, it was like I was a kid. I get to be a cop, like how cool is that? Kids want to be cops, and what a privilege. And I get to chase bad guys, and I get to help people, and I can drive fast, and I can, just the little things that you can, chase people, and you never know what your day's going to be like. You can have a day where you're like, I can't believe that happened. I've seen it all. And then the next day you're like, oh, nope, here's something now I never even could imagine,
Exactly.
And it's just, it's a wild ride, man.
And a lot of people don't understand that unless you put the boots on and went out there. They hear stories, they watch the news, usually the bad stuff that comes on. They're really thrilling about hearing all these horror stories and whatever, but you don't really realize exactly what happens when you're sleeping in your neighborhood. You don't see that. A lot of times, the the stations or the news, they don't want to pick that stuff up unless it's something, especially involving an officer. They want to know about that. But the passion, the passion that develops becoming a police officer, a lot of times, like for me personally, it stemmed from childhood growing up. And I didn't know, I don't think as a kid that I wanted to be a police officer, but I definitely had respect for them. Do you think your childhood had something to do with wanting to go out there and help other people?
No. I grew up with a family that you help the community. You donate, you help others in need. But not a single person in my family's in law enforcement.
All right.
Or a first responder. I have a couple people that were military. I have a cousin that won the Medal of Honor. And my grandpa was in Korea, and my other grandpa was in World War II. And so, but I mean, everyone's grandpa was, so.
Right.
But no one in my family was in law enforcement. And actually, most people were afraid of them. I have a lot of criminals in my family.
Oh, yeah.
So it's kind of like I broke the mold.
Do you still keep in contact everybody? Because I know a lot of times that's what happens. We go into law enforcement, we go into a first responder field, and a lot of our family members, they've had their own issues going on. Some of them have been to prison. Some of them have, been addicts and alcoholics in our lives, and they're a family. We stay with them for the most part.
Yeah, I don't have any real relationships with my extended family anymore. I just have different values than them.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
So, and it is okay. It is okay because you're doing what you need to do for yourself and working on yourself. And I think maybe a lot of that inside perpetuated into, later on in life, you became a cop. When did you know, or when did you figure out, or people tell you that there was something wrong, that maybe that you needed some help?
No one told me.
Okay.
I switched departments. I moved from the City of Auburn to the City of Des Moines 5 years in, because I knew I wanted a different start, a fresh start, trying to, looking for something to help me out. And I was at Des Moines. I was struggling. And so I reached out. I started doing some research, trying to find a first responder psychologist. I didn't want a counselor. I wanted a psychologist, which is hard to find. And I found one. I started going to her for about a year and a half before I met you.
All right. What do you describe your struggles that you were going through? Because some of us that are listening right now are going through things, and it might be very similar to yours. And they might be like listening really intently about what's going on or what was going on during your struggles.
I can honestly say now, looking back, it's a lot easier to see where my struggles were. But what got me in to talk to the psychologist in first spot was intrusive thoughts of self-harm. I didn't want to be here anymore. And I know that wasn't good. And with my access to firearms and stuff I knew I needed help. So that was kind of the tipping point for me. But what got me to the part of where I wanted to harm myself was excessive drinking, isolation, hypervigilance, nightmares, not sleeping. And the last city I worked for, we had rotating shifts. So you would work 3 months one shift, and then 2 months another shift, then 2 months another shift, and then 3 months another shift. And so you were constantly never getting sleep, coupled with nightmares.
Nightmares about the things that you've seen and done.
Yeah.
Been involved in.
I'd wake up fighting, punching, night sweats. I couldn't fall asleep.
Did you think at that time there was any help available? Did you think, was there anybody you can lean on to, one of your partners or maybe command staff?
No, I didn't trust command staff. I didn't trust peer support, because nothing in the police department that in my experience stayed confidential. And that was my personal experience. And I know that's not everyone's. And I had a lot of mistrust with supervisors, because I had in Auburn arrested my commander for a DUI.
Okay.
that the working sergeant tried to cover up, and I wouldn't let that happen. And then the internal investigation was done by his good friend, the assistant chief, and it didn't go to an outside agency. And so I just had a bad experience with command staff.
Do you feel that they held that against you and that's why you left that department?
I felt like if I stayed, they would have. I wouldn't have been picked. I think like all my peers in that department, I'm still close with my patrol buddies. I'm close to the guys I worked with in Auburn versus the guys I worked with in Des Moines. And they all backed me 110%.
Right. There
was no doubt that I had the support from my colleagues and my direct supervisor. I had good sergeants that were my sergeants. It was just I was working a different shift with a different sergeant that day. I came in to work an OT shift when all this happened.
Yeah.
And so I had a very good experience with that, but I just had a very poor experience with all the other command staff.
And you know what I call that? I call that integrity. And I know a lot of us, there's no more, well, I guess there is the good boy mentality back from the 60s and 70s and 80s, but that's fading out. Drunk driving kills, we all know it. And hey, if you put yourself behind the wheel and you have to be a cop or firefighter or whoever you are, you deserve to suffer the consequences before you go out and kill someone. Because I've worked with a lot of people that have gotten breaks over and over and over again until they run over their best friend. And then they go to jail. And they go, shit, this could have stopped like 8 years ago if I would have actually got arrested.
Well, is it really giving them a break by not addressing the issue?
I don't think so. No.
You know, that's my big thing. And it was clear this commander, he was a good friend of mine, really good friend. I was pissed at him. It was clear before this that he had issues that he wasn't addressing. And it's like, had those been addressed at prior times where he had indiscretions at work, would he got to where he was? No one knows, but it's perpetuating the cycle. And that happened to another sergeant in the city of Des Moines that I watched. You know, had the behavior been addressed by the command staff instead of just punishing them and being like, why is this person behaving this way? Right. What is going on? How can we help? It would be interesting to see what could have happened. You know, would their careers be saved? And like, you know, you talk about the good old boys club. I love my guys. I'm not saying he, she, man, he, Roy Club or any like that. I'm not anti-men cops. I'm not anti any of that. But in Auburn, in the city of Auburn, in Auburn, Washington, a female has never been promoted to a supervisory level. I thought I could be that female, but once I made that decision to push that bound with that commander, I knew it was over.
Yeah.
And I think that's really sad. That department's over 100 years old, and that says something, you know. So, and there's been lots of qualified females, you know. I'm not saying
there's been lots of what?
Qualified females that could have been sergeants.
Of course. And it's with the change though. It's like what you're doing now. We're talking about this stuff and letting it out. More and more of us are to be talking about it, and things will change. That some departments are, you know, back in the Stone Age still.
Yeah, and I mean, there's lots of good people there. You know,
of course,
my best friends work there, so it's like, and I know they'd be great leaders, and sometimes don't want to. Sometimes a patrol officer just wants to remain a patrol officer.
Yeah,
and there's nothing wrong with that, you know. It's interesting just seeing the field.
Yeah. So all this built up with you over the years, and so you went to your second department, and you find yourself thinking about committing suicide.
Yeah.
Tell us about that and what happened, and then how'd you pull yourself out of that?
That was a battle. So I started going to my therapist, and she wanted me to go right into treatment, and I told her to pound sand.
Why?
Because I didn't think I had an issue, you know.
So you're thinking about killing yourself, and you don't think you have an issue, and you're drinking.
Well, and I can handle it myself, right? I can deal with it.
I get it.
Treatment's for people that are really screwed up, right?
Yeah,
that was my mentality.
Rehab's for quitters.
And rehab's for criminals, right? Because the court system, that's where rehab goes. I'm not going with a bunch of criminals and people. They don't know what it's like to do my job.
Yeah.
No. You want me to talk to a bunch of strangers? No.
I'm terminally unique. I'm a lot different from anybody else. I have a different alcohol problem or drug problem.
Exactly. And so with her help, I found a nurse practitioner that also worked with first responders. And so we started getting on medications. I ended up having some health issues at the same time. So I had an OB who worked with me and helped me get time off without my work knowing for medical reasons. So I did an intensive kind of outpatient period with my psychologist because I was out for OB stuff at, and took 6 weeks off. And then I went back to work and I was like, I'm doing good. I worked on this, still drinking. Right. I didn't think I had a problem because I wasn't drinking every day. I didn't drink when I got off shift, but I drank on my days off and I drank a lot. I'm drinking a lot. Besides drinking, I was cutting. And
you were cutting. You're cutting your skin with like a razor blade.
Yeah, and I was on these heavy meds, drinking, working, and I was getting to the point at work where I would like drive around and think of ways to harm myself or kill myself, and so
drive on your patrol car.
Yep. Like, in the middle of the night, no calls, kind of just driving around and doing that.
Trying to get into something that would cause you to die or put yourself in danger.
Yeah. And I was always first on scene.
Yeah.
I mean, I love to catch criminals. I was hungry, I was always working. One, because that's what the taxpayers pay me to do. I am paid to work. I'm not paid to sit and wait. I am paid to be out there driving around your neighborhoods at 2 a.m. while you sleep. I'm with you. I firmly believe that. I was always out driving around and first on scene for everything, or almost everything, or trying to find stolen cars and all that. I ended up having to go back out for a medical procedure. I had to have a hysterectomy. Okay. And then when I came back, I was feeling good after that. I was like, I had another little break. I was feeling pretty good after that. And it got to September, October 2021. And I was getting really bad. I wasn't sleeping. The drinking was going up. I wasn't giving a care about anything. I was pretty much numb, shut off. I couldn't remember anything. I was getting to the point where I would interview people and I would use my body camera to do the interviews or my phone. I would record them. And then I wouldn't remember what was said in the interview. And I would have to re-listen to that interview to write a report. And normally I'm very auditory. Right. I have a very auditory memory. So I never had to write notes. I never had to review my records. But I would watch my videos, but I would only watch them after I wrote a report or just to double check to make sure that my timeline was right. Right. But I didn't rely on them. That was not something I had ever done. And so it was pretty wild with my memory. Like when my memory started failing me, that's when I got really scared.
All right. And this is after you're planning on killing yourself.
Yeah. And I'd rehearsed it multiple times. I'd gone to Tacoma Narrows Bridge, Saltwater State Park Bridge. I'd put a gun up to my head a couple times. I pulled my gun out of the holster a couple times and just held it in my hand. Mm-hmm. What stopped you from doing it? A lot of times I got called out to a call and, I was on shift. And so I was working and I was like, I don't want to make a mess in my car. I don't want to make a mess. I don't want to have someone clean this up. Kind of those moments of, okay, take a deep breath. And so then I just carry on, right? Right. Just keep going. And I would only disclose the stuff a couple weeks later so I couldn't be committed. I knew the game, right? I knew how to keep everything going. by saying the right things and disclosing stuff at the right times. So it wasn't no longer imminent, right?
Right. You were just sort of right in that wave, right? You were just like going up and down and just like getting to that point.
It was like Russian roulette, you know?
Was it sort of a rush, just thinking about it? Going back in your mind, thinking about when you're doing that and getting up to that point and the point where you're going to make a decision or you have the ability to make a decision, everlasting decision with everybody else in your life, knowing that, it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
But it wasn't a temporary problem in my mind.
Yes.
You know?
Until you found out that it could be a temporary problem. Because you've gotten through it, you've got it interrupted numerous times. And of course, being the good cop out there wanting to help people and thinking of others first, you don't want to leave a mess. You don't want to do it here. You need to go answer this call. Your partners need your help. So there was that passion still that was there with you.
And the final straw what got me into treatment was I was in the locker room at the station and I had the gun up to my head, finger on the trigger. And I didn't care at that point. I didn't care. I was doing it. I didn't care if there was a mess. Figured the girls' locker room, there's only 8 of us. Mm-hmm. It's not that big of a deal. It's not that big of an inconvenience. No one really uses this room. And I got toned out to a call of a tone out call, which is a high priority call.
Remember what the call was?
I couldn't tell you.
Okay.
Could not tell you.
But it was a high priority.
High priority call probably turned into nothing. Yeah. That's generally what happened, you know.
But you got the tone. You got the tone, right? That tone that we'll never forget.
Yeah. And so I holstered my gun and I went to work and I worked the rest of the night. I couldn't tell you what happened the rest of the night. No clue. I couldn't tell you if I wrote reports. I imagine I did. And the next, and then we switched from night shift to day shift right then. So I had a couple days off and I waited, of course. And I reached out to my psychologist after about 3 days. And I said, I think it's time for me to go. So she knew about Deer Hollow in Utah, mm-hmm. which has a first responder program. Mm-hmm. So I looked into that and I met with the intake person for them. And I was extremely closed off. I was extremely shut down. And this intake person just rubbed me the wrong way. She's like, you have to be open. You have to be willing to talk. You have to do this. And it's intense and it's all this. And I wasn't there. Was
it in person or was that over the phone?
Over Zoom.
Okay. All right.
And she's like, you're not answering my questions. And I'm like, I don't even know your name. Right. Like, who are you? You need to tell me something about you for me to even think that I'm going to tell you something. Right. And so their admissions person, a counselor, not their intake, but the admissions counselor called me up and she goes, hey, I don't know if my program's right for you, but I do know you need help. And I know of this other program. Would you be willing to talk to them? And I said, okay. I said, where is it at? And they said, California. And I was like, well, that's better than Utah in the winter. So I was like, okay, but I hate California.
You hate California? So, why do you hate California?
It's just all Californians move and they try to change everything when they move. It's like, stop moving and changing everything to how it was in California. If you wanted to stay in California. I mean, I love Californians now that I've been there, and Southern California is nice. I spent 4 months there.
See what happens? You just got to visit California. Maybe you'll like it.
I visited. I was down there.
I missed you by that much.
And I'll visit again.
All right.
But and it's always nice to get the sun. I miss the sun. I do miss the sun. Don't miss the concrete, but I miss the sun. So I met the submissions counselor from First Responder Wellness, called me and was like, hey, and she immediately told me who she was and her story. And I was like, okay. And she goes, we go at your speed. Whatever your speed is and where you're at, we meet you at that. I go, you mean I don't just have to be intense right away and I don't have to do everything that you tell me that I need to do? Because I was anti-yoga. I was like, because my
And,
sister's big into yoga, and my sister and I at that time don't get along. So I didn't want anything to do with something that she liked, right?
right. So you'd hated yoga.
Uh,
You wouldn't do yoga.
I wasn't going to do yoga.
How do you
Now I
feel
do
about yoga now?
Now I do yoga.
Okay, cool.
I like the fast moving yoga. I don't like the slow one, but I like the fast moving. I
All
go
right.
once a week up here.
Nice. Wow. What a
So
turnaround.
I know, right?
So yeah, totally. So the mission person talked to you and you felt comfortable. I'm sure trust was a big thing with you, like all
Yeah.
cops that don't want everybody to know what's going on with them.
Yeah, and I still didn't open up, and it's but they were the how approachable the admissions counselor was to me made me more comfortable. I mean, I was a nervous wreck going, and I mean, I didn't even tell my husband why I was going. I just
Really?
said, "Hey, I'm going to go to treatment.
Yeah.
They can get me in on Friday," because the admissions counselor wanted me there like the next day because of how high risk I was.
Yes.
But again, I wanted to go to this training. It's again my terms, right? Everything's on my terms.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on benzos and I didn't want to do detox. I was like, I can do this myself. And so I detoxed off of benzos myself. And I didn't drink for a week. And I came in sober because I'm stubborn enough that if you tell me to do something and I give you my word, I'm going to follow through. My word's my word. If there's no follow through, it doesn't matter. So then I get there, and I guess your intake appointment with your counselor, your first case manager, I had a case manager, and I guess they take hours, right? They're supposed to take a long time. They do this block. Mine took 45 minutes.
They usually do it's called a biopsych social. So they sit you down, they ask you a whole life questions. It's almost like something you get in, when you get hired for the police department, their background investigation. They ask you everything from the childhood up until now.
Yeah, mine took maybe 45 minutes.
Wow, A student, huh?
No, I just didn't talk. I didn't know that. Who are you? I got to figure out who you are. I'm in this new place. I don't know anyone. No, you don't get to know anything about me.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tell you one thing, Tricia. You're not the only person that happens to.
Yeah.
I would say 85 to 90% of the people that come in there, they don't come in there with open arms saying, yeah, I'm ready for treatment.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you my whole life story. It doesn't happen that way with us.
Yeah. So, which I thought was really, it wasn't push. There was no pressure. It was just like, okay, you're giving me these answers and that's what it is. I'm not going to push you to open more. And I think as just given my background and then two, being a cop, I think that's a very important approach, because we have to have some power. At least I do. I have to have some control in this chaos that I have absolutely no control over. And I don't trust my mind right now. I don't trust my decision making, but I just need a glimpse of control. Even if it's a fake control, it's the idea that I had control.
The perception to yourself that you have some kind of control. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because without control, what do we have?
And I already had nothing, it's just interesting, looking back and how I was just basically told everyone to fucking pound sand.
Right.
When I first met him.
That's when we first met. And I remember, and I kept my distance. You had your team working with you, and we got highly trained professionals. They're all culturally competent. And we've dealt with this numerous times before, and everybody goes on their own pace. And you had your own pace, and I just made sure that I steered clear of it as much as possible. Not that I didn't love you or that I didn't want to be a part of it, but I know you were hurting. And a lot of times you don't need all this different things, different angles coming in at you, and things piss you off, especially in treatment when you're there. You live 1,000 miles away or wherever you're coming from, and then you're stuck there, and this is all new, and you maybe have some expectations. What were your expectations of treatment, inpatient treatment, versus what was reality?
When I first talked to the admissions person, I thought that there was going to be more females, and that we were going to be housed more together and have more opportunities to be together and not so separated. And given my background with experience with males and male supervisors and being sexually assaulted at work and by male staff, I didn't really want to be around guys.
Mm-hmm.
So I was assigned to a caseworker, and he immediately was like, I don't think I'm a good fit for you, which I think is awesome.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, he's just like, I thought it was really cool because I wasn't going to say anything. I wouldn't tell you that you wouldn't work for me. And so I thought it was really cool that we went, and then I just stuck with one person, which I think for me, having one person do it all at the beginning helped.
If you don't jive with them, tell them, I'm not jiving with you right now. Maybe you can refer me somewhere else. And the therapist should be professional enough to say the same thing as like, I don't think this is going to work out. I think this other avenue might work better. I'm not abandoning you, but I think this is going to work better for you.
Yeah. And then when they first switched me to a different psychologist, I was like, this ain't going to work for me. And I said that, and they listened. And it's because I didn't have a voice. So just being able to say this person before I went to treatment, and even I'm still working on having a voice, right? Mm-hmm. That's something, seeing myself, seeing my identity, seeing who I am, absent a police officer, absent a wife. I said, this isn't going to work. I need something different. I need more. And it was really cool how it worked. And the program listened. They switched me around, and they didn't tell me. It was like, boom, one day I got a phone call. I was like, okay, you can't just mic drop me. I need a little more notice.
All right.
And so I met with this person. I was pissed because you didn't tell me this was coming. And then
I remember you being pissed a lot back then.
I was pissed a lot. I was pissed for the first 60 days, I'd say. Hence why I was there 120. This person wore a face mask, and I was like, I got to be able to see your face. I can't see your face. I ain't going to trust you. So I said that. And so then I kept asking for more because I did better in small groups and not large groups. And then I asked for a women's group, and I made noise for it. And we got one. And it was really helpful and beneficial. And it was funny because the women didn't want to do it at first.
Really?
Yeah. And they were like, because women are kind of assholes to each other sometimes. And they're like, I don't like women, blah, blah, blah. And mm-hmm. They have their own issues with whatever happened in their life. And I was like, just give it a try. Trust me, just give it a try. And they did. And one of them was totally against it. And she didn't even want to be my roommate. And we are best friends. So it is funny what happens when you're willing to push yourself. The best thing I've ever failed at was committing suicide. And when I went to treatment, the funny part was I didn't think I had a drinking problem. I thought I was only there because I had mental illness and suicide, right? And self-harm. It wasn't until about 90 days in treatment that I was like, I have a problem with booze. I even made mistakes, while I was in treatment. My sobriety date and my treatment dates don't match up.
Tell us about that one.
So I screwed up a couple times. I pressed my boundaries a couple times, but nothing bad happened. I didn't get kicked out of the program. I didn't get yelled at. I was just like, hey, what's going on? How could it? So that was the first mistake. And then the second one, I had a couple beers. And it was probably the thing that made me realize that I had an issue with alcohol. Was having 2 beers, and I had 2 beers, and I immediately started Googling. And let me back up. I hadn't thought of self-harm for probably 3 weeks at that point, which is a significant period of time for me. And I had 2 beers, and I immediately started Googling how to kill myself. And I was like, what the fuck am I doing? And that's when I realized I had a problem with booze. It's like, I can't drink because if I do, I will kill myself. I know it was a mistake, but I made this realization. And I made it in a safe environment versus coming home and being on my own.
You came into the program wanting help. You wanted help for probably a long time, and then you got the help. So what kept you in treatment?
Initially, what kept me in is I knew if I left, I'd be dead. I would say, maybe you can give me better insight on this. I would say about 60 days in, I started to kind of sort of realize it's working. My perspective was changing, and I was becoming more open. I was still closed. And there's things that I didn't address in treatment and never said to anyone. And I wasn't ready yet at the time, so I knew it wasn't safe for me to go home. If I go home, I would have been back or dead. So I wanted to make it last. I wanted to make a permanent change in my life. So I continued with it, and I went past the 90 days. I went to 120, and I had the ability to stay longer. The program would let me. Probably could have used it, not gonna lie. But I was, no offense, sick of the concrete. I wanted trees. I wanted to see my dog. I wanted to be home. I was like, I gotta learn to function at home. I can't keep running. Needless to say, though, when I got home, it was a clusterfuck.
Well, we'll get back to that in a second. But so at 60-day mark, you felt like there was some change that you were feeling, and then there was things also, those secrets that you haven't told anybody.
Never disclosed any of it to any of my inpatient things. I've been working with the same psychologist for 2.5 years here. I finally told her this month, and I have not been able to say them out loud. And she's like, holy hell, do you have anything more you need to hide? She's like, I don't know, you just ask.
So how does that feel? We're definitely not going into that stuff, but
no.
How does it feel to get that out?
It feels weird. It's a relief. It's scary. It's overwhelming, but I'm able to handle it. I'm letting it out, I think, when I can let it out, where I'm in a safe spot to not hurt myself. Yeah. I think had I let it out before, I would have ended up harming myself in some way. Whether that's self-harm, drinking, taking pills to not feel, whatever. I was so raw, even at the end of my treatment, that I wasn't ready to do EMDR. Like, that's why I could have stayed longer.
Yeah.
My psychologist up here does it, and we aren't even doing it yet. Okay. I've been home for 9 months, and we're not even there. We're still in stabilization.
And guess what? It's not a sprint. It's a marathon. So you leave 120 days. You could have stayed some more. However, you needed to venture back out home. And what happened there?
I came home with the understanding, my husband and I had an understanding that if he were to drink, because you can't tell anyone they're not allowed to drink. I'm a firm believer in that.
I agree.
Each person has to make their own decisions and their own choices. So I said, if you choose to drink, please don't drink around me. If you want to drink at home, let me know. I will leave. If you are out somewhere and drinking, please do not come home. Stay wherever you're at. I don't care where you're at or who you're with. Just don't come home. And have the decency to call me. I was home for a week and he came home drunk 3 times. And I said, well, I'm going to go stay at a friend's. I had a friend that had a mother-in-law apartment, so I moved into there. And ultimately, long story short, he continued to drink. I knew I couldn't be around someone drinking. I knew it would lead me to kill myself. It was my life. He might have an issue or not with alcohol. It's his decision of whether he does or doesn't. Doesn't make him a bad person. But I knew if I was around alcohol, I would kill myself. It's that black and white for me. And our marriage therapist said that. This is what she's saying. She can't be around it.
To drink is to die.
To drink is to die. And I knew I can be around it in a public setting with other people, but at home I needed support from my spouse. That's your safe space, right? So ultimately I filed for divorce, and the divorce is going at an extremely slow rate due to him. I've relinquished that. It's going to be done in the next year. It's probably going to take another 1.5 years. We don't have kids. It shouldn't take that long. It is what it is. Besides going through the divorce, I lost my dog because he kept her. I moved 4 times in the last year. I broke my foot. I had to have surgery. L&I didn't approve my claim, workers' comp for Washington State.
Right.
Did not approve my claim for 7 months. And because of that, I had to do a fit for duty for work. Work ordered me to do fit for duty because I wasn't under medical leave for L&I. And I was deemed unfit. Had L&I approved my claim, they wouldn't have been able to do that.
But if you wouldn't have taken the fit for duty, they had the option to terminate you anyway on the spot.
Yeah. And I needed health care because I needed insurance.
Right.
And so here I am. And so L&I finally approved my claim in June. Work allowed me 4 months to see if I could get fit again, which I couldn't, which ultimately led to them terminating me.
Did they offer you to retire, or did they just said?
No, I'm applying for medical retirement through my retirement program, but that takes a while, and it's a lot of paperwork, and I get really overwhelmed really fast. So it takes me a long time to do things, but that's okay. And I'm going at the pace that I can go. I got finally terminated in November. Workers' comp recalculated, had my wages all wrong. So I've been fighting with workers' comp to get compensated with the right wages because I'm underpaid. So I'm living on about 50% of my income that I was making, plus then losing your marriage and the income that your spouse brought.
Yes.
And having to pay for healthcare because a lot of my treatment isn't covered by workers' comp.
Your current treatment right now?
Yep. Okay. They don't cover acupuncture. They don't cover equine. They don't cover most of my medications. So
that's going to be all out of pocket with you.
Yeah. So it's cheaper for me to pay Cobra for my healthcare than it is for me to go on another insurance policy. Because on top of this, I also have to go to physical therapy every week for my pelvic floor with all my surgeries and stuff that I've had, which is interesting on a side note to learn. Your pelvic floor carries most of your trauma. And I have a very informed physical therapist. And she's like, this is more than just your surgeries. This is everything that's ever happened to you that we're trying to deal with in your body, which is kind of cool. So I ended up also then during this time, family issues. My mom basically told me to pound sand and that I was worthless. And so my dad had a stroke. He's doing better now. But it was just, when you get out of treatment, life hits you.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is all this stuff happened to me. And had I not gone to treatment, I wouldn't have been able to deal with it.
You might not even be here right now.
No, I'd be dead. Guarantee you, 100%. My firearms are in my friend's safe. Everything's a lot. Extra medicines kept at their house just because why have it around? And I have a very good couple people in my life that I'm pretty lucky.
Good. Mm-hmm. That is great. And you didn't have to go back to drinking. You got through all that.
No, I actually had a dream about drinking the other night. It was, I think, of a big closure for me. I was living with my husband. We were in Buckley, and he had left two Modelo's in the fridge, which was a good beer. And so I opened the fridge and I drank one, and I didn't even realize I was drinking one. And I looked at the empty bottle and I got mad, so I grabbed the other bottle out of the fridge and I broke it in the sink. And I realized in the dream that had I stayed with him, I would have drank, which would have killed me. I woke up and I was really pissed because I thought I had drank, and I'm a month away from my year sobriety date. I was really pissed because I was like, did I drink yesterday? Like, what happened? Like, I thought it, and I was really pissed, and I realized I had it. And I think that was the closure I needed to see how pissed I was in my dream at myself for drinking. Like, that I don't want to drink. Right. And I understand that things come in waves, and you just got to let things go.
How did you know that you'd be okay once leaving treatment? What does your future look like now? Because you've gone through so much in this last year, and you stayed sober through it.
Well, so I continued with hosting a women's Zoom support group because I feel like that is a necessity for first responders and military. There's things that happen to us that they're too hard to talk about in co-ed groups. Sometimes it's just nice to bitch and, what's the struggle like to be a mom? Sometimes moms just talk about that.
And this women's group is just for first responders?
In military, yeah. First responders and military.
And if someone listening right now wants to get a hold of that and find out, 'cause I know you have to vet everybody, of course, And
Yeah.
we got to make sure that, that it's not freely just given to everybody, but how would someone find it? And what could I do to help promote that for you?
They can contact me. I'm on LinkedIn, and they can message me through that.
All right.
Or if you get them, you can contact me. You can pass along my email. You can post my email if you want. I don't really. If people want to heckle me, they can heckle me. If they want to chat, they can chat.
Okay.
Um,
Well, folks, I'll put her email on there and also a connection to LinkedIn too. They can get a hold of you.
yeah. So I continue that every Wednesday. I go to an AA meeting every Sunday. I go to a fellowship meeting Tuesdays via Zoom. And then I go to another one Friday mornings at 9:30 via Zoom. And that started with a gal from West Coast Trauma Retreat.
Okay.
So I've started to branch out and meet other people, other first responders and military. And so I'm building a database of people and resources for first responders and military, because to find culturally competent groups, therapists, AA meetings, whatever it is. And eventually I'd like to start an in-person one in the Puget Sound. I know there's an AA in person, but there's not a fellowship one, and then there's not one in the South Sound.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of people in the South Sound that need a place to go just to have a place. You don't have to have an addiction or anything.
But we get that, and that's the community that we feel safe in and protected, so we can be vulnerable. Vulnerability is a big thing.
And I think part of it too is we can laugh. A lot of times my Wednesday group that I lead ends up in laughter, making some silly joke about something that we've seen or said or done, because you still got to be able to laugh. Part of what I've experienced as a first responder is that we do cope with it by laughter and crew jokes sometimes. And it can be healthy to a certain degree. And when you laugh about and make comments, the regular society doesn't get it, So I started that, and I'd love to start an in-person one. So I've reached out to Nick Bauer with Code 4 Northwest.
Nick is legit for sure. Yep.
He's an awesome dude. And so I'm hoping after the holidays that we can work on it some more, kind of start up an in-person one. He has a connection with a chief in Sumner, I think, that we might be able to use this space, because I want a safe space too. I want a place where first responders feel comfortable going versus, just a community hall or something. So I'm going to do that. And I've also been accepted into graduate school for a master's in counseling.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I actually started this fall, but with the divorce, moving, and so much going on, and so I took a medical leave of absence because I was getting too triggered. Like, I was driving home going 100 miles an hour and not remember coming home.
Wow.
So I took a pause, and I have a very good school that, I just was like my country song. I lost my job, lost my husband, lost my dog, lost my house, had PTSD. Can you let me start over next fall with no additional costs to me? And they did. And it's a very, very cool program. And that program has had a couple first responders go through.
That's amazing. So what's your future look like? I mean, what direction you want to go? Do you want to eventually work with first responders?
Yeah, that's my first responders and their families. That's the clientele I want to work with.
You're going to be awesome.
Thanks. And I think it's important, though, that even though I got terminated from my job, and that doesn't happen for most people, I know I can't carry a gun. It's just that simple. It's too easy for me to use it in an inappropriate way.
Right.
So why put myself in that situation? And I know a lot of law enforcement that sought help that has had points where they put a gun to their head that are still working on the street. So I think that's an important message too, that if you get help, you don't lose your job.
Exactly. That is so important. And I can't stress that enough. Departments need to catch up with the times. We invest so much in our officers that once we're the helpers. We're helping everybody else get into rehabs, get into shelters, going here and there, risking our lives to protect families and to protect the children. But when we ask for help, a lot of times it gets put back in our face like, well, you're not fit to do what you're doing anymore, and get cut off. And that's so unfortunate.
Yeah.
But the future for you, I think everything happens for a reason. And I think moving forward with the meetings that you go to, I think the tools that you're using, you've talked about them, is staying connected is the big thing. And picking up that phone, it seems heavy, but picking up that phone and calling and asking for help, or just saying, this is what's going on. And I mean, if you ever call me or anybody does, I'll usually ask you, I mean, do you want me to give you some solutions? Do you want me to just listen? And a lot of times we just need someone to listen to us, and it feels so much better when it's out.
Yeah.
So.
And sometimes for me, it's not even talking, it's just being around someone, you know?
Exactly. Being around our peers, being around someone that gets us, and staying connected. You go into 3 to 4 meetings a week, and you want to open up an in-person one, which is extremely important, because there's a lot of us out there that are in need of help, but we're afraid. We're fearful of the word getting out, people talking about us, my command staff finding out that I have an issue with whatever it is, and knowing that there's a support available. So is there anything you want to say maybe that you didn't say, or any kind of words of encouragement to people out there that are struggling, currently listening to this and wondering, what should I do? Because talking about this will bring someone to the point of, what, if these guys can do it and they got help, they're talking about what they've gone through, and it's such a secret to me, they're going to be more apt to seek help and get advice from someone else.
Yeah. I think for me, the biggest thing is that I absolutely have no regrets for the last year and doing what I need to do. I absolutely have zero regrets. And you asked me a year ago today if I would be grateful that I'm alive. I would have said no. And now I can say emphatically yes. Being a police officer is all I've ever wanted to do. And I went about it in a weird way to get to the career I wanted. I have no regrets of becoming a police officer. I love the job. The job didn't love me. And that's okay. I did what I could. I served my community well I could. Now I'm looking forward to a new chapter and serving my community in a different way.
How did the job not love you? What does that mean?
It ate me alive, right? It ate me up. It changed who I was. I had no light in my eyes. I had no laughter. I was numb. I was a robot by the end. But I still love the job.
Right. It's a machine. It's a machine. It's a machine, and we're numbers, basically, and we figure that out.
And you are a number. You can love it, but you're still a number.
Right.
Because if I wasn't, my department I'd still be there, right? And I'm not saying bad about my department. It's a business too, right?
Of course.
They have to have bodies. They have to have people to do the job. But I absolutely have no regrets for getting home. I would not have any regrets if I killed myself because I won't be around.
That would suck.
That would suck. But talk about regret, right?
Right.
So it's kind of a weird way to look at it, but it works in my head.
Good. And I'm glad to see what you're doing, and you're continuing to grow, continue to use your tools, and your future looks great. I mean, start off as a prosecutor, become a cop, then you're going to be a therapist. I mean, your resume is great, and you get it. You get us. So you are definitely needed. I want to thank you right now for not taking your life, because the world needs more people like you.
Thank you.
Tricia Minkler, clinical psychologist for first responders.
For a person that hated school, I'm apparently going back.
You saw the signs, and you put down the gloves, and you decided, hey, my way's not working, and if I don't change, I am going to kill myself, and then it'll all be over with. I mean, there's a reason for everything, and us going through our struggles in life, I firmly believe that you can turn it into a positive, but it takes work, and you just have to work, and you've done so much work, so thank you.
Thank you.
And everybody else listening, I hope you guys have a great week, great rest of your day, and be good to one another. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.